Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing how to craft compelling characters. I feel that characters are what make or break any given story. And the reason is because if you don't have characters that the audience can either relate to in some way, or sympathize with, or find interesting, or most importantly, root for, then ultimately the audience is not going to care or be invested in the story. And when creating interesting, compelling characters, it all begins with us as human beings. Because, of course, all of us are unique in that we all have things we love, we all have goals, we all have fears, we all have unique and different personalities, of course. But we are all connected in that we all go through similar things in life, the trials and tribulations of growing up, of falling in love, of starting a job, of experiencing loss, all these things that connect us as human beings. And so when you think about your all-time favorite characters from a show, a book, a movie, a play, etc., I'm sure it's a character that you either relate to in some way or admire or just find really cool and interesting, or someone that you find really entertaining. And to me, I think it's most interesting and compelling when it's a character that you can see yourself in some way, or a character that you can strive to be, a character you want to be more like, someone you just simply admire, that is like a role model for you. And for me personally, basically my all-time favorite cartoon character is Tommy Pickles from Rugrats. I've talked about Rugrats so much on this podcast, I feel like, and it is my all-time favorite childhood cartoon. And I'm sure, so when you think about Tommy Pickles, what's the one adjective you think of? Brave. He's a brave baby. That is his most, that's the thing that makes him who he is. That's his dominant trait as a character. And so with Tommy, he's an amazing character to me personally because he's always someone I've admired, even when I was really little watching that show. And even to this day, that show is as old as I am. It's 30, so it's crazy. But Tommy is just someone to truly admire because he's a wonderful leader. He has a moral compass. A baby's got to do what a baby's got to do, as he says. He is always up for any adventure, but he also looks out for his friends, and he's just truly a really great, wonderful character. And then you look at the opposite of that, Chucky. What's the first quality you think of when you think about Chucky Finster? He's scared, but also, though he's scared, he's cautious and at times trying to keep Tommy in line because he looks out for Tommy, his best friend. And though he is often scared, he still goes on the adventures because then he knows he'd be missing out and because he has to face his fears. So in a way, he's a very endearing character in that he always faces his fears. So I can go through so many different shows that I've discussed, of course, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on TV shows because I just want to touch on a few different interesting characters that are universally agreed to be just really interesting, really compelling. But when you look at any TV comedy in particular and characters that are multi-layered, characters that are really, really interesting and fascinating to watch and watch on a week-to-week basis, or if you're binging a show, that what makes them unique is that they have things that are contradictions to them. Meaning, okay, so if typically, just to stick with Tommy Pickles for a moment, typically he is brave. So when are times that he is scared? Or when are the times that he is fearful or can be nervous or worried? So when you already know a character inside and out and what makes them who they are, then what are times that take them outside of their comfort zone? And so it always goes back to, again, what is it that they want? And one of the most interesting characters in television, I would say, is Michael Scott from The Office. However, he stems from David Brent from the original Office from the UK. And David Brent is so interesting, plainly and simply because, okay, he wants to be liked, and he thinks he is this really great, entertaining boss. But truthfully, he comes off as a jerk and really narcissistic and not funny at all. And so therein lies the comedy. And similarly with Michael Scott, played of course by Steve Carell so brilliantly, such an amazing character. However, of course there are things that Michael is like there are faults to him, as is customary to us, again, us as human beings and to any character, that they can't just be this seemingly perfect being, because then that is a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu, where they have no unique qualities. They have nothing that makes them relatable in the sense that, well, not everyone's perfect all the time. What are their faults as humans? So with Michael in particular, he has many faults, of course, that he's childish, that he is immature a lot, that he like makes off-color jokes a lot, that he thinks he's funny when really he's super cringy. He lacks self-awareness, certainly. But then what are the good sides of Michael? That he cares so deeply about his employees. Like, he cares so much about the office. He thinks he's the world's best boss, but we don't, that's debatable, of course. And also, he is a great salesman. And his arc throughout the show, throughout the 7 seasons when he's on the show, with him being like, he doesn't really have anything outside of the office. So he sees the office as his family. But then we see the vulnerabilities of Michael Scott with his loneliness, and that he is just kind of struggling and bumbling through life a little bit. And it's like, how did this guy become the boss? Things like that. And so then like his arc when Holiday Flax eventually comes to the office, they fall in love, and then, like how it ends up with eventually with them getting married and him leaving the office, because now he no longer necessarily needs the office, as in Dunder Mifflin. He's able to then start a family of his own with Holly. So that completes his character arc. And of course, he's just simply such a funny, entertaining character. And so a lot about what makes characters interesting is that, I know someone in my life who's like that. So what's funny is that apparently a lot of kids nowadays that makes you sound so old saying that, but kids now who like are watching The Office, like young kids who, of course weren't even born at the time when it was originally airing, but now are watching it. They love it because they know someone, for instance, that is similar to Dwight Schrute. Like they have a friend who's weird and offbeat like Dwight, or, just things like that. So that's really fun that even kids can relate to these quirky people. So that just goes back to simply just really fantastic writing. And so since that's a comedy, of course, finding the funny moments in particular, like those cringy things, those cringy human faux pas that are just so fascinating and just so entertaining to watch. And similarly, another show with so many wonderful, amazing characters that I did discuss was Schitt's Creek, with any one of the Roses, but in particular, Moira Rose is such an amazing character. Plainly and simply, even just how she presents herself with all of her wigs, of course, as she calls them, her girls, her wigs. Like each episode, she has a different wig, and her amazing outfits. And in particular, though, and like the way she speaks, of course, with her accent, so it's fantastic. Played, of course, by Catherine O'Hara, such a brilliant character. But what makes her unique to so many things, of course, but one of the like really popular scenes of the show, it's early on. It's like the scene with Moira and David when they're trying to cook, the fold in the cheese scene. It's so hilarious.
A quarter cup at a time. A thin stream. It's supposed to be a thin stream. Blend it really well, or you'll burn it. David, that's not right.
Okay, well, that's because I'm ladling and stirring at the same time and you're just standing there.
Now is not the time to lose focus, darling.
This was your idea. You're the one who allegedly made the enchiladas.
Yes, so try to keep up. Okay, next. Now's the time to sprinkle in the chili pepper flakes.
We've already done that.
What number are we on?
Oh my God, is this not your mother's recipe?
Yes, and now I'm passing it on to you. So try to keep up. Next step is to fold in the cheese.
What does that mean? What does fold in the cheese mean?
You fold it in.
I understand that, but how do you fold it? Do you fold it in half like a piece of paper and drop it in the pot, or what do you do?
David, I cannot show you everything.
Okay, well, can you show me one thing?
Here's what you do. You just fold it in.
Okay, I don't know how to fold broken cheese like that.
And I don't know how to be any clearer. You take that thing that's in your hand, and you...
If you say fold in one more time...
It says fold it in!
This is your recipe! You fold in the cheese then.
Don't you dare.
You fold it in.
David! Oh, good. Now I see bubbles. David! What does burning smell like?
And it's just so funny because Moira trying to prove that she knows what she's doing, and then, of course, she has no clue what she's doing. David, what does burning smell like? So hilarious, so ridiculous. And then it's great, though, because by the end, they manage to actually make a meal successfully, and then it turns out pretty good, and Johnny Rose is impressed. You know, Johnny Rose, of course, played by Eugene Levy. And then at the end, though, David says, this is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing, like a one and only thing. We're not going to be doing this again. So it's too funny. So, you know, that's just hilarious stuff, too. But even, of course, another show I discussed earlier this year, Fleabag, the main character, Fleabag, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Such an amazing character, obviously, and we see so much of her vulnerabilities. That's what really, to me, makes her in particular so compelling. She comes off as this, and she is really confident and strongly opinionated, but then also we see the darkness of her in that she is still grieving the loss, the tragic death of her friend Boo, her best friend Boo, and now what's left behind with the cafe, doing that all on her own now. And then she's trying to find love, and then of course when she ends up falling in love with the priest, the hot priest in season 2, and how that pans out. And how she's so connected with the audience when she looks at us. And there is that's where we get a lot of the humor in that show of her being so confident and knowing, telling you the true thing about whatever's going on in the scene. Like, we have an insight into her thoughts, but then we still see ultimately how she is struggling with her own loneliness. And she is such an amazing character. And I realize, of course, I mostly talk about TV comedies, and I feel like I'm missing out so much, and I've been meaning to watch certain other highly regarded shows, one of which, of course, is Breaking Bad. And I know how that series ends, too, and I'm sure even you do, too, if you haven't even seen the show, but maybe not. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it, but with, of course, the main character, Walter White, and obviously so amazing, played by Bryan Cranston. And so even with that show, though I haven't even seen the show, I've seen maybe a scene or two here and there for different courses I've taken over the years for different TV writing courses. And so with Walter White, though, so the premise for him, for that character, is that he is, I believe, I don't want to mess this up now since I'm not entirely too familiar, but he's a chemistry teacher basically, and he finds out he has cancer. And so then the whole thing he becomes a business partner with one of his students, Jesse Pinkman, played by Aaron Paul. And then they basically are cooking and dealing meth. So they become meth dealers. And so he's doing it, though. So then it's that's a character where, okay, he's clearly a bad guy. He's clearly a criminal. However, what makes him interesting is that, well, he's also a good guy in that he's doing this for his family. And then we see all this interesting stuff. And then in particular with the ending, too, which, again, I won't spoil, with that character arc. And the speech he gives and all this interesting stuff with that character. And another interesting character, it's another show I've been meaning to watch that I will check out eventually. It is Mad Men. And the character is Peggy Olson, played by Elizabeth Moss. And I'm sure, even if you're not familiar with Mad Men, I'm sure somewhere on the internet you've seen the meme of Peggy Olson looking like a badass, with a cigarette in her mouth, walking. I'm sure you've seen that meme somewhere on the internet because I've seen it many times. And I was curious and I looked up the context of that scene. And in that scene, actually, so prior to that, she had left her job with basically wanting to start over. So in that scene, so I had always thought for some reason that that scene was her quitting her job and walking out of the office. But actually it's her starting the first day on her new job. So looking like a badass, walking through all confident that she's starting a new job at a new advertising agency. So that's really cool too, and that's just a really iconic thing. And I've seen I looked up different clips here and there, and there's a great one where she's talking to this guy and basically showing her worth, where he's coming to her wanting to get an advertising job done, and then she's doing this, and she basically is gets all the money from him, and it's just really, really fantastic writing.
Let's say you were to do this for me, and on Monday you explained to Ginsburg and Campbell that I asked you to. Only I asked you sometime last week.
Do you have a brief? Did Ginsburg have a brief?
I never told Ginsburg, okay? You have to remember that. You know about the airline strike, right?
Yes. Why is Mohawk still flying?
Because even though all the other mechanics are on strike, boo-hoo, they need more wrenches or something, Mohawk's mechanics have a side deal, so they have to keep working.
They must love that.
Yeah, well, they're gonna love the overtime. American Airlines is taking everything big and giving their Northeast corridor to Mohawk.
So what do you want? How about something like Mohawk, breaking the strike one flight at a time? Or maybe fly over the picket line with Mohawk.
Hey, Trotsky, you're in advertising.
Fine. So what's the angle?
Campbell, or I, had this idea that it would be something about, you know, how times are tough and you can't get anywhere. So thank God, Mohawk is offering emergency service.
You don't want to use the word emergency with an airplane.
I don't want to do any of this. I'll see you Monday.
Hold on a second. You want me to work up an entire corporate image campaign for $10?
I can make you do it for nothing. I'm the boss.
You're right. The work is $10. The lie is extra.
Incredible. What do you make a week, sweetheart?
You don't know, huh? That's helpful.
You know, I could fire you.
Great. There's some portfolios in Joan's office. Maybe you could find somebody tonight.
Why are you doing this to me?
Because you're being very demanding for someone who has no other choice. Dazzle me.
Fine. How much you want?
How much you got?
$400.
Give me all of it.
Jesus. It better be good.
Do you want me to take your watch?
So eventually I'm going to have to check out this show because it just seems so fantastic. And people have said that she has the strongest character arc. There's also a really great scene I had seen with her and the main character, Don Draper, played by John Hamm. So it just seems like really amazing. So characters like that, even of course another show I've been meaning to watch, another vastly popular drama, The Sopranos, with Tony Soprano. That, okay, even with that too, I'm sure, even, I won't spoil it though if you haven't seen it, but I'm sure you're aware of like that controversial ending of the series, which again, I won't, but I mean, I'm sure like you've heard of it even in pop culture, but I won't touch on it if you're wanting to watch this show. But like, how could you have not? I feel like that's one of those things where I feel like it's been discussed so much in different shows and everything. But anyway, with Tony Soprano, played by the late James Gandolfini, how it's about like a mob story. He's in the mafia and all of that. But again, it goes back to family. So seeing the vulnerabilities of him wanting to protect his family and everything, but then like seeing all this crazy criminal stuff and all that stuff that happens. So, and again, I'm not too familiar with the show. I mean, I did see the final scene though, because I was curious with all that. So that's another show I've been meaning to check out, which at some point I will eventually. But then if you look at, of course, even famous cartoon characters, and arguably to me the most famous cartoon character is Bugs Bunny. I think that's the most, like, he's the most recognized character, and arguably perhaps the most beloved character universally if you look around like the entire world, and the most recognized character. And because with Bugs Bunny, like him being a trickster and like him being just so sly and clever. And also what's great about Bugs is that one of those characters where he doesn't even have to say anything. He could just give a sly look and you just know, like, in a way, like, you're on his side. Like, he's on your side. Like, you're in on the joke with Bugs Bunny, too. So it's fantastic. And obviously so many iconic things with Bugs Bunny. Like, Rabbit of Seville is a big one that comes to mind. And, of course, the whole rabbit season, duck season with Bugs and Daffy. All of these things. And how early on, apparently, that they wanted to be clear that with Bugs, he's not meant to be a bully, that when he is provoked by, say, Elmer Fudd, like all of the antagonists in the show, and Yosemite Sam, that it's because they are, like, hunting him and stuff, and then he has to outsmart whoever it is that is after him. So it's about his, like, cunning genius and his tricks and his, what's up, Doc? And, you know, all that iconic stuff about Bugs Bunny. So he's, of course, just an amazing character. But then if you look at another play I discussed earlier this year, A Streetcar Named Desire, with Blanche Dubois, how she's such a fascinating, rich character because, again, she has all these complexities and contradictions to her. She comes off as this, like, high society woman, but then we also see how she is so delusional in a way. She's lying to herself even as something as silly as her age. And then how her marriage crumbled with that as well. And that really she has, at the start of the play, she has nothing. She's just running off and she has no home or anything. And then she just is taking solace with her sister and her sister's husband, Stanley Kowalski, who of course is the main villain really in that play. But she's so fascinating because there are things to admire about her as well, but then there are so many things that you can sympathize with Blanche, how really she's just like struggling to maintain any sense of who she truly is or who she once was and who she wants to be now. And so it's really hard for her. So she just truly is a really fascinating character too. And so many. Another great one too that I discussed, I'm realizing I'm kind of like recapping from other episodes throughout this year. But another really interesting character is Alison McRoberts from Kevin Can F Himself. And she, of course, is really complex to say the least. Of course, Alison played by Annie Murphy, aka Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek. But she's so interesting because we see how she's pushed to the extreme of wanting to kill her husband, Kevin. And then what made her become this way? What led to her wanting to make this extreme decision? But then also sympathizing with her in that she's in a loveless marriage. She's in an emotionally abusive marriage. And though she's done some questionable things throughout season 1, we still see how she looks out for Patty, who is looking out for her in return. And so they develop a really wonderful, true partnership, truly. And another show I haven't yet discussed that I will, but I purposely held off because I figured to just wait until the next season. It's another show that everyone's been talking about this year in particular, won a bunch of awards at the Emmys this year, is Ted Lasso on Apple TV. Fantastic show. I truly highly recommend it. It has some of the best writing in any TV show, in anything at all, in my opinion. It's amazing. You can look at any character on that show, truly, and they have such a really rich character arc. Like from Jamie Tart to Sam to Coach Beard to Nate, of course, to Ted himself, to especially Rebecca. She's an amazing character. To Keely. Oh my God, that show. I can't wait to discuss that show because there's so many amazing character arcs in that show. And again, I won't spoil anything, but with Ted in particular too, how he is this extremely optimistic and warm-hearted person and always encouraging his players to be the best versions of themselves on and off the field. And so what is the thing that's going to break Ted, break his optimism? And what are the moments where he is truly vulnerable and not his usual optimistic self? But of course, always rooting for him. And he's someone that you truly want in your life. He feels like someone I need a pep talk from Ted Lasso. He truly feels like such a warm, kind, wonderful person. So he's an amazing character played by Jason Sudeikis. He rightfully won an Emmy for that role this year. So amazing. And Rebecca as well. Rebecca as this amazing, high and mighty boss ass bitch in that show but then we see her vulnerabilities in even the very first episode, and I don't want to, get too much into the plot with all of that, but we see her vulnerabilities so much when she's going through her divorce and with her ex-husband and all of those things. But then we see her strength and her wonderful friendship with Keely and her relationship, how it changes with I'm blanking on his name in this moment. Higgins, that's it. He's a wonderful character too. So seeing her going through her ups and downs when she sings, it's amazing. And also with her friend, Sassy, as she likes to call herself, her friend Flo, so good. So many amazing characters in that show. So I will be discussing it eventually. But again, going back to what makes all these characters interesting. Well, they have unique things about them. They're not just one-dimensional, of course. What are the obstacles in their way? What are they striving for? How do we get to see them in their moments of vulnerability, in their moments of success, in their moments of failure? And so it's all really just so amazing and interesting seeing all these characters and how they grow and strive. So I can kind of keep going through different examples, but I feel you get the idea, of course. And it's, again, I don't want to really repeat myself either with other shows I've discussed in the past, but I could keep doing it, of course, but just to kind of, for the sake of wrapping this up a little bit. So ultimately, it's about creating characters that you find interesting, and whether it's something that relates to you, but how can you connect with that character? Whether you're striving to be that character in some way, or someone you want to root for, that's all the things that you find interesting, that we as humans makes all of us interesting, and that we have all these different unique things and our unique experiences that make us interesting, and then connecting that with your character. If a character is, again, mostly scared, then what are moments where they are brave? Things like that. Going back to, again, with Tommy and Chucky. So even as simple as that, their one trait, and what are the moments where they are against that and how they can overcome things and become stronger as a result of it and go through wonderful ups and downs, as we all do as humans. That's how we are connected, all of us, and it's just so wonderful, and that's what makes it so much fun to watch different shows and like relate to these characters and root for them and aspire to be them and just really connect with them. And with that, that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to visit storytellingsaga.com, and as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next episode, I'm going to be releasing it next week to coincide with its 30th anniversary. Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. I will be discussing Beauty and the Beast. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.